I stood frozen in the crowded living room, listening to my brother toast his new promotion by calling me uneducated and worthless. It played like a joke, and everyone laughed. My mother laughed the loudest. I did not cry or scream. I just smiled. Inside my coat pocket, my phone buzzed with an email none of them were qualified to read. I walked out that night as a ghost, but the wreckage I left behind was just the beginning. My name is Olivia Sanchez, and for the last 10 years, I have existed as a footnote in the glossy hardcover biography of my family. I have been the asterisk, the fine print, the error they never quite managed to edit out. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, a coronation for the golden child. But as I pulled my beaten-up sedan into the driveway of the sprawling colonial house in Cedar Glen, Maryland, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. It was the physical sensation of bracing for impact. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a long day at the gym or a late night out with friends. It was a deep, marrow-level exhaustion that came from trying to prove you are worthy of basic respect to the two people who were supposed to give it to you unconditionally. I smoothed down my dress. It was simple, navy blue, bought on clearance, but I had tailored it myself to fit perfectly. I took a deep breath, grabbed the box from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. The driveway was already packed with luxury SUVs and sedans that cost more than my entire year of rent. This was my brother's night. Gavin had just been promoted to senior consultant at Redwood Strategy Group, a firm that specialized in making rich companies richer. To my parents, this was not just a job. It was a vindication of their parenting. It was proof that they had produced greatness. Well, 50% greatness. I walked up the stone path, the box heavy in my hands. Inside was a hand-painted ceramic serving platter I had made at the community studio I rented in the evenings. I had spent 3 weeks on it, firing it twice, glazing it with a complex geometric pattern in the exact shade of teal my mother claimed was her favorite. It was my olive branch. It was my last attempt to say, "Look, I can make beautiful things too." The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and was immediately walled by a wall of noise and expensive perfume. The house was packed. My parents had invited everyone. There were neighbors from the country club, distant relatives we had not seen since Christmas 3 years ago, and a legion of Gavin's colleagues from Redwood Strategy Group. They all looked the same: men in sharp charcoal suits, women in cocktail dresses that shimmered under the recessed lighting. I navigated through the foyer, clutching my gift like a shield. No one looked at me. It was a unique talent my family's circle possessed, the ability to look right through a person as if they were made of glass. I spotted my mother near the grand staircase. She was holding a crystal flute, laughing at something a tall, gray-haired man was saying. She looked radiant, triumphant. "Mom," I said. Stepping into her orbit, she turned. Her smile flickered, dimmed, and then reset to a setting I recognized: tolerant disappointment. "Olivia," she said. Her eyes did a quick scan of my dress, my hair, my shoes. She found them wanting. "You made it. We were worried you would get lost. You know how you are with directions." "I have lived here for 20 years, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "I brought this for the house." I held out the box. She took it with one hand, not even glancing at the wrapping. She did not ask what it was. She did not shake it or express curiosity. She simply turned and placed it on a side table already piled high with empty wine glasses and discarded napkins. "That is sweet," she said, her attention already drifting back to the gray-haired man. "Oh, Robert, this is Olivia. She is figuring things out." The man, Robert, gave me a polite, pitying nod. "Ah, the younger sister. Gavin talks about you." I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I could only imagine what Gavin said. "Go get a drink, Olivia," my mother said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "Try not to be in the way when the catering staff comes through." I walked away before my face could betray the sting. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in my own childhood home. I found a corner near the entrance to the kitchen. a spot where the shadows were deeper, and leaned against the wall. I watched them. I watched my father clapping men on the back, his face flushed with pride. I watched Gavin holding court in the center of the living room, gesturing broadly, his voice booming with the confidence of a man who has never been told no. It was then that I heard it. The acoustics in the house were strange. Sound traveled along the crown molding in unexpected ways. My parents had moved to the wet bar, just around the partition from where I stood. They thought they were having a private moment. The Johnsons asked about Olivia again. My father's voice grumbled, asking what she is doing for work these days. I didn't know what to tell them. It is embarrassing. Martha, she is 29 years old. I know, my mother sighed. I heard the clink of a bottle against a glass. We just have to accept it. We have one successful child. That is more than some people get. Gavin has enough ambition for 2 lifetimes. Olivia, she just lacks that spark. She is content with being nothing. Lack of ambition, my father agreed. That is exactly it. She has no drive. Never did. I stood there, paralyzed. My hands were trembling at my sides. No drive. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march around that partition and scream about the year I dropped out of college, not because I wanted to, but because Dad's heart condition had nearly bankrupted the family business. I wanted to scream about the 14-hour shifts I worked at the diner to pay the mortgage while Gavin finished his MBA without a single student loan. I wanted to scream about the promise they made to send me back to school, a promise that evaporated the moment the business stabilized. But I didn't. I swallowed the scream. It tasted like ash. Suddenly, the music cut out. The room quieted down. Gavin was standing on the raised hearth of the fireplace, a glass of champagne raised high. He looked like a prince addressing his subjects. "Attention, everyone," Gavin said, his voice smooth, projected perfectly. If I could just have a moment. The room hushed. All eyes were on him. My parents beamed from the bar, moving closer to the front. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," Gavin began. "This promotion to senior consultant isn't just about a new title. It is about validation. It is about the hard work, the late nights, the strategic vision that Redwood stands for. We just closed the Vantigrid Systems account, and I am proud to say I led that charge." Applause broke out. Polite, enthusiastic clapping. Gavin soaked it up, nodding humble brag acknowledgments. "But," he continued, raising a hand to silence them, "success isn't a solo journey. You need a support system. You need people who push you." He pointed to our parents. "Mom, Dad, thank you for setting the bar high, for teaching me that mediocrity is not an option." More applause. My mother wiped a tear from her eye. Then, Gavin's eyes scanned the room. They locked onto me in my dark corner. A slow, cruel grin spread across his face. "And of course," he said, his tone shifting. It became lighter, mocking, the tone one uses for a slow child or a funny pet. "We have to acknowledge the other end of the spectrum, my little sister, Olivia." The heads turned, 200 eyes fixed on me. I froze. "Come on out. Liv," Gavin beckoned. "Don't be shy." I didn't move. "You know," Gavin said to the room, treating the crowd like an audience at a comedy club. I look at Olivia, and I'm reminded of how lucky I am. She keeps me grounded, every time I think my job is hard. I remember that Olivia here is still trying to figure out what she wants to be when she grows up. A few people chuckled. It was nervous laughter. "But seriously," Gavin went on, and now the venom was palpable. "This is my sister, uneducated, no future. She has mastered the art of doing absolutely nothing. She is really just a professional family dependent. But hey, every family needs a cautionary tale, right?" He raised his glass toward me. "To Olivia, for showing us exactly what we don't want to be." The silence that followed lasted for a heartbeat, and then it happened. The room laughed. It started with a few of Gavin's drunk colleagues, then rippled outward. My father chuckled, shaking his head as if it were a harmless ribbing. But then I looked at my mother. She wasn't looking at me with sympathy. She wasn't telling Gavin to stop. She was laughing. She was laughing louder than anyone else, her head thrown back, enjoying the wit of her successful son at the expense of her failure of a daughter. That laughter hit me like a physical blow. It tore through the last layer of defense I had. It wasn't just humiliation. It was confirmation. They didn't just think I was a failure. They enjoyed it. My pain was their punchline. The room blurred for a second. The heat rose in my cheeks. But then, something strange happened. The heat turned cold. Ice cold. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I walked out of the shadows. I walked right into the center of the room until I was standing 10 feet from Gavin. The laughter died down, replaced by a curious tension. They were waiting for the breakdown. They were waiting for the tears. I reached out to a passing waiter and took a glass of champagne from his tray. My hand was steady. I looked up at Gavin, who was smirking down at me from the hearth. I looked at my mother, whose smile was faltering just a fraction. I looked at my father, who looked annoyed that I was prolonging the moment. I raised the glass. "Congratulations, Gavin," I said. My voice was clear, calm, and terrifyingly level. It carried to every corner of the room. "You are right. I don't belong in this room. I don't belong in this version of success." I took a slow sip of the champagne, maintaining eye contact with my brother. "Enjoy your night," I said. "And take a good look, because this is the last time any of you will ever see me." I placed the full glass down on the mantelpiece next to him. The sound of the glass hitting the marble echoed in the sudden silence. I turned around. I did not look back. I could feel their eyes boring into my spine. I walked through the crowd, and this time, they parted like the Red Sea. I walked past the table where my unopened gift sat like a piece of trash. I walked out the front door and into the night air. The moment the heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, the noise of the party was cut off. It was just the wind and the sound of my own breathing. I walked to my car. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was razor sharp. I got in, locked the door, and sat there in the darkness. My phone on the passenger seat lit up. It buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again, a constant, angry vibration. Message from Mom. "Get back in here and apologize. You are making a scene." Message from Dad. "Unbelievable. So dramatic. Grow up. Olivia." Message from Gavin. "Can't take a joke. Come have a drink and stop being pathetic." I looked at the notifications stacking up. Words that used to hurt. Words that used to control me. Now, they were just pixels. I reached for the phone. My thumb hovered over the power button. I was about to turn it off, to sever the connection, when a new notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It wasn't a text. It was an email. The subject line made my heart stop, then restart with a violent thud against my ribs. Subject offer letter, Blue Peak, Creative House. I stared at it. The timestamp was 2 minutes ago. Blue Peak Creative House, the agency in Silverport, the job I had applied for 3 months ago, the one I had assumed was a long shot, a fantasy I had entertained during sleepless nights. I swiped the screen. I opened the email. "Dear Ms. Sanchez, we are pleased to offer you the position of Junior Art Director at Blue Peak Creative House. We were incredibly impressed by your portfolio and your self-taught approach to design solutions. We believe you have exactly the kind of raw, unconventional perspective our team needs. Attached are the details of your compensation package, including a starting salary of $85,000 a year and a relocation stipend of $5,000. Please note that we need an urgent start date for the upcoming quarter. We require your signed acceptance within 48 hours. I read the numbers again. $85,000. It was more money than my father had paid me in 5 years of working at his shop. It was freedom. It was a ticket out. I looked up at the house. The lights were blazing. I could see the silhouettes of people moving in the living room, laughing, drinking, celebrating the narrative that Olivia Sanchez was worthless. I looked back down at the phone. A smile touched my lips. A real smile. I wasn't just leaving, I was ascending. And they had absolutely no idea what was coming. The silence inside my car was heavy, a physical weight pressing against the windows, sealing me in with the ghosts of the last decade. My brother's voice was still ringing in my ears, that polished, confident baritone announcing to the world that I was a cautionary tale, uneducated, worthless. I leaned my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes. The tears finally came, but they were not the hot, hysterical tears of a child who had been scolded. They were cold, slow tears that leaked out from a place of deep, exhausted resignation. I was not crying because Gavin had insulted me. I was crying because I had just realized, with terrifying clarity, that they were not lying. In their minds, they were telling the truth. They had repeated the lie for so long that it had calcified into fact. They truly believed I was a failure by nature, rather than a casualty of their own survival. To understand why that laughter in the living room cut so deep, you have to understand who I was before I became the family joke. 8 years ago, I was 21 years old. I was not drifting. I was sprinting. I was a student at the local community college, finishing my prerequisites with a 3.9 GPA, holding an acceptance letter to a state university for their communication design program. I had a portfolio full of sketches and wireframes. I had a plan. I was going to be the first woman in the Sanchez line to own a creative agency. I worked part-time at the campus library. I paid for my own books, and I never missed a deadline. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. I remembered the smell of the hospital waiting room, that acrid mix of floor wax and stale coffee. My father had collapsed at the warehouse. It was a heart complication, severe enough to require surgery and months of bed rest. The family business, a mid-sized logistics supply firm that my father ruled with an iron grip, immediately went into a tailspin. He had kept all the vendor relationships, all the accounts, and all the debt structures in his head. Without him, the ship was sinking. My mother was in a state of absolute panic. She was a woman who had been taken care of her entire life, first by her father, then by her husband. Confronted with a stack of overdue invoices and a supplier threatening to sue, she crumbled. We sat at the kitchen table 3 days after Dad's surgery. The house felt cold. Gavin was there, home for the weekend from his prestigious private university, wearing a hoodie that cost more than my car insurance. "We are going to lose the house," my mother had sobbed, her hands trembling over a pile of bank notices. "We are going to lose everything." She looked at Gavin, then she looked at me, and then the calculation happened. I saw it happen in her eyes. It was a cold, pragmatic arithmetic. "Gavin is in his final year," she said, her voice pleading. "He is on the dean's list. He has that internship at the consulting firm lined up. We cannot pull him out. It would destroy his future." Then she turned to me. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her palms were sweaty. "Olivia, honey," she said, "we just need you to step in, just for a semester. You have a good head for organization. You can manage the office, talk to the suppliers, keep things running until your father is back on his feet. Just take a leave of absence. We will pay for you to go back as soon as this is over. I promise." I looked at Gavin. He didn't offer to help. He didn't offer to take a semester off. He just looked at the table and said, "It makes sense. Liv, you are just doing art stuff. You can pick that up anytime. Just art stuff." I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream that my future mattered too. But I looked at my mother's terrified face, and I looked at the fear in my father's eyes as he lay in the hospital bed, worrying about his legacy. "Okay," I said. "1 semester." That was the first lie. 1 semester turned into 2. The business was in worse shape than we thought. I was not just answering phones. I was negotiating payment plans with angry creditors. I was driving the delivery van when the driver quit. I was balancing ledgers at 2 in the morning. I dropped my classes. I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped drawing to keep the cash flow positive so we could pay Gavin's tuition because that was the priority. Always I took a second job. I worked the night shift at a 24-hour diner on the highway. I would finish at the warehouse at 6 in the evening, drive to the diner, work until 2 in the morning, sleep for 4 hours, and do it all again. My hands, which used to be stained with charcoal and ink, were now permanently smelling of fryer grease and cardboard dust. I did this for 18 months. During those 18 months, Gavin graduated. He walked across the stage in his cap and gown, and my parents cheered until they were hoarse. I was there, standing in the back, wearing my work uniform under my coat because I had to leave early for a shift. Gavin got his internship, then he got his junior associate role. He moved into a nice apartment in the city. He bought a new car. When my father finally recovered enough to return to work, the business was safe. I had saved it. I had literally worked my fingers to the bone to keep their lifestyle afloat. So, one night over dinner, I brought it up. "Dad is back full-time now," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "I have reapplied to the university for the spring term. I need the tuition money you promised." The silence that followed was long and suffocating. My father cut his steak, chewing slowly. My mother took a sip of wine. "Now isn't a good time, Olivia," my father said, not looking at me. "The medical bills were high. We have to be conservative with cash." "But you paid for Gavin," I said. "That was different," my mother interjected quickly. "Gavin was finishing a degree. You are just starting over. And honestly, Olivia, look at you. You have been out of school for nearly 2 years. Are you sure you are even cut out for that academic environment anymore? You seem so tired all the time." "I am tired because I've been working 2 jobs to save your company," I snapped. "Don't raise your voice," my father warned, pointing his fork at me. "This is exactly what I mean. You are emotional. You lack focus. Maybe you should just keep working at the diner for a while. Save your own money if you want to go so bad." The promise evaporated. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, gaslighting erosion. Over the next few years, the narrative shifted. They stopped telling people I took time off to help the family. Instead, the story became that I dropped out. Olivia just couldn't handle the pressure of college. I heard my mother tell an aunt one Thanksgiving, "She is a bit of a drifter, lacks ambition." "She is lazy," my father would grunt. "Gavin is the worker. Olivia likes the easy path." I tried to fight it. I tried to explain. But every time I opened my mouth, I was cut off. "Do you have a degree?" Gavin would ask with a smirk during arguments. "No. Then maybe you don't understand the complexities of the market. Live." They stripped me of my sacrifice and wore it as my failure. But I did not stop. That was the part they did not see. They thought because I was quiet, I was defeated. While I worked those dead-end jobs to pay my rent, because I moved out the second I could afford a studio apartment the size of a closet I was learning, I couldn't afford tuition. So I pirated the design software. I watched thousands of hours of tutorials on YouTube. I went to the library and read every book on typography, user experience, and branding strategy. I built a portfolio under a pseudonym, taking small freelance jobs on the internet for $5, then $50, then $500. When I visited home, I would bring my laptop. I would be working on a logo for a startup in Berlin or a layout for a blog in Seattle. "Still playing on the computer?" my father would ask, walking past me to get a beer. "You are almost 30. Olivia, when are you going to get a real job?" "I am working, Dad," I would say. "Clicking a mouse isn't work," he would scoff. "Gavin works. He wears a suit. He goes to an office. That is work." It was a closed loop. If I didn't do it their way, it didn't count. If I didn't have the piece of paper, I didn't have the skill. And because they refused to help me get the piece of paper, they ensured I remained, in their eyes, invalid. And tonight was the crescendo. Gavin standing there, rewriting history in front of 100 people. "She is really just a professional family dependent." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The tears had stopped. The sadness was being replaced by something harder, something useful. I looked down at the phone in my lap. The screen was still glowing with the email from Blue Peak Creative House. I read the details again, letting the reality anchor me. Base salary, $85,000 per annum. I had never made more than $28,000 in a year. Benefits: full medical, dental, and vision coverage. Starting day 1. I hadn't been to a dentist in 4 years. Relocation assistance, $5,000. That was enough to break my lease and hire a moving truck. Position junior art director. Art director. Not assistant, not intern, director. They didn't care about my lack of a degree. Dana Rourke, the creative director who had interviewed me over Zoom 3 times, had never once asked to see a transcript. She had looked at my portfolio. She had looked at the campaign I designed for a local coffee shop, the one I did for free just to have a case study. And she had said, "You understand visual storytelling better than people I have hired with master's degrees. You have grit. I can see it in your work." My family saw a dropout. Dana saw a survivor. But there was a catch. I scrolled down to the bottom of the email. "Please confirm your acceptance of this offer no later than Friday at 5 in the afternoon." I looked at the digital clock on my dashboard. It was Wednesday night, 11:30. I had less than 48 hours to decide if I was brave enough to burn the bridge. If I took this job, I had to move to Silverport. It was 3 hours away. It wasn't across the country, but it was far enough that I couldn't come running back if my car broke down or if I got lonely. It was a new city, a new industry, a high-stakes environment where I would be competing against people who had the degrees, the pedigrees, and the confidence that comes from never having been told they were worthless. My thumb hovered over the reply button. A notification popped up at the top of the screen. A text from my father. "Dad, you embarrassed your brother. He is upset. We are going to brunch at the club on Sunday. You will come, and you will be pleasant. Don't make things worse. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. They expected me to fall back in line. They expected me to show up on Sunday, head bowed, ready to take another serving of humiliation because they thought I had nowhere else to go. They thought they owned me because they thought I was broken." I looked at the text, then I looked at the email. The choice wasn't between 2 jobs. The choice was between existing as a prop in their play or becoming the protagonist of my own. I tapped reply. My fingers flew across the small keyboard. I didn't need 48 hours. I didn't even need 48 seconds. "Dear Ms. Rourke and the Blue Peak team, I accept. I will be ready to start on Monday. Sincerely, Olivia Sanchez." I hit send. The message sent swoosh sound filled the quiet car. It sounded like a gunshot. I put the car in reverse. I backed out of the driveway of the house where I had lost my 20s. I didn't look at the window where the party was still going. I didn't look at the room that used to be mine. I drove toward the highway. The road ahead was dark. But for the first time in a decade, the destination was mine. I was going to Silverport. And I wasn't just bringing my clothes and my laptop. I was bringing the slide deck, the one file on my hard drive that Gavin had forgotten about. The one that proved his strategic vision was nothing more than a theft of my playing on the computer, but that could wait. First, I had to survive the escape. The morning sun hit my face, but it did not feel like a new day. It felt like the aftermath of a natural disaster, where the structures are still standing but the foundations have been liquefied. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes I had scavenged from the back of the liquor store down the street. My phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, with a Silverport area code. I cleared my throat, trying to shake off the gravel of a sleepless night. "Hello?" I answered. "Is this Olivia Sanchez?" The voice on the other end was brisk, energetic, and completely devoid of the condescension I had grown used to hearing. "Yes, this is she. Hi, Olivia. This is Dana Rourke from Blue Peak. I just saw your email come through. I know it is barely 8 in the morning, but I wanted to call you personally." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Oh, good morning, Ms. Rourke?" "Call me Dana," she said. "I am thrilled you accepted. Olivia, truly, I was telling the partners yesterday that your portfolio has a raw honesty we have been missing. We have a lot of polished technicians here, but we need someone who understands the emotional weight of a brand. That is you." I sat there, holding the phone with both hands, stunned. Raw honesty, emotional weight. These were the things my family called being overly sensitive, and lacking professional polish. To hear a stranger, a successful, powerful woman, frame my perceived weaknesses as my greatest strengths felt like oxygen rushing into a sealed room. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. "That means a lot." "We will send over the formal onboarding paperwork by noon," Dana continued. "Get some rest. Pack your bags. We are going to throw you into the deep end on Monday. Welcome to the team." The line went dead. I stared at the screen for a long moment. It was real. This wasn't a fever dream induced by humiliation. I opened my laptop to check my email again, just to make sure the offer letter hadn't disappeared. As I scrolled through my inbox, bypassing the spam and the promotional newsletters, my eyes caught something in the trash folder. It was a cluster of unread notifications I had mass deleted 2 days ago without looking, because I had been so consumed with glazing that ceramic platter for Gavin's party. I recovered them. Subject interview request. Studio 54. Design. Subject follow-up. Horizon marketing. Subject availability. Check the creative group. 3 of them. I had missed 3 interview requests. I looked at the timestamps. They had all come in earlier in the week. I hadn't seen them. Why? Because on Tuesday, I was running errands for my mother. On Wednesday, I was helping my father sort out his tax receipts because he claimed his eyes were too bad to read the small print. On Thursday, I was baking, wrapping, and panic tailoring my dress. I felt a cold wave of nausea wash over me. It wasn't just that they treated me like I was worthless. It was that their demands on my time, demands they felt entitled to make because they assumed my time had no value, had actively sabotaged my attempts to escape. If Blue Peak hadn't been so aggressive, if Dana hadn't been so quick to decide, I would have missed this opportunity too. I would be sitting here, rejected by the world, believing my brother's assessment that I was unhireable. I realized then that this wasn't just a dysfunctional family dynamic. It was a cage. If I stayed in Cedar Glen, if I continued to answer their calls and run their errands in a desperate bid for approval, I would miss my entire life. I would wake up at 50 years old, still the helper, still the failure, while they stood on my shoulders to reach higher shelves. I printed out the Blue Peak offer letter. I didn't have a scanner, so I used an app on my phone to scan the signed page. My hand shook as I held the pen. The blue ink looked stark against the white paper. Olivia Sanchez. It looked like a declaration of war. I hit send. Then, the purge began. I did not have much, but even what I had felt like too much baggage. I looked around my small studio apartment, the futon I had bought secondhand, the wobbly dining table, the stack of fashion magazines I had collected for inspiration. They all smelled like this place. They smelled like stagnation. I took pictures of the furniture and posted them on the community marketplace app. Must go today. Best offer takes it. By 2 p.m. Strangers were hauling away my life. A college student took the futon for $40. A young couple took the table for $20. I sold my entire collection of paperbacks to a used bookstore for $15. I was stripping the room down to the studs. I packed only what mattered. My clothes, my laptop, my drawing tablet, a box of personal documents, the ceramic tools I had bought with my own money, everything else, the decorative pillows my mother had given me because she didn't want them anymore. The old winter coat Gavin had handed down to me I put in garbage bags and walked them to the dumpster behind the building. Throwing away Gavin's old coat felt incredibly satisfying. It was a perfectly good coat. Technically, it was expensive wool, but every time I wore it, I felt small. I felt like I was literally wearing his cast-offs. I dropped the bag into the metal bin and listened to the heavy thud. By Friday morning, the apartment was empty. It echoed when I walked across the linoleum floor. I handed the keys to the landlord, a grumpy man who seemed surprised I was actually leaving. "Heading out of town?" he asked, counting the cash I had given him to break the lease early. "Yes," I said. "I got a job in Silverport." "Big city?" he grunted. "Good luck." I got into my car. It was packed to the ceiling. The passenger seat was full of boxes. The rearview mirror was blocked, so I had to rely on my side mirrors. I felt like a refugee fleeing a war zone. except the war had been silent and the wounds were invisible. For 2 days, my phone had been relatively quiet. I assumed they were waiting for me to come crawling back. They were giving me the silent treatment, a tactic my mother loved. She believed that if she ignored me long enough, the vacuum of her attention would suck me back in. But as I merged onto the interstate, putting the Cedar Glen exit sign in my rearview mirror, the silence broke. My phone, mounted on the dashboard, lit up. Incoming call, Mom. I let it ring. It rang until it went to voicemail. Then, a text. Mom, this has gone on long enough. Olivia, we are all worried sick. You need to come home and apologize to your brother. He is very hurt. You made us look terrible in front of the partners. I stared at the road ahead. You made us look terrible. Not, are you okay? Not, where did you go? Just concern for the optical damage I had caused to the family brand. Then, a text from Dad. Dad, stop acting like a child. You are 29, not 12. Running away solves nothing. Come to Sunday brunch. We can discuss your attitude. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned white. Discuss my attitude, as if I were an unruly employee. Then, Gavin. Gavin, seriously. Live blocking us, LOL. Look, I am sorry if the joke landed wrong. You know I have a dark sense of humor. You are way too sensitive. Just come back and we can chill. Don't ruin my image with this drama queen act. People are asking where you are. There it was. The sorry if, the classic non-apology of the narcissist. He wasn't sorry for what he said. He was sorry I reacted. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried that my absence would create questions he didn't want to answer. Don't ruin my image. I reached for the phone. I didn't want to do it. A part of me, the part that was still a little girl wanting her big brother to protect her, wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe it was just a joke. I wanted to believe that if I explained it one more time, they would finally hear me. But I remembered the laughter. I remembered the sound of my mother cackling at my humiliation. I knew that if I kept that line of communication open, I would turn the car around. I would go back. I would apologize for being abused, and I would never leave again. I tapped the screen. Contact Mom. Block caller. Contact Dad. Block caller. Contact Gavin. Block caller. The finality of it made me gasp. A short, sharp intake of breath. It felt like amputation. It was necessary. But it hurt. I was cutting off the gangrenous limb to save the body. I drove. The landscape changed. The rolling suburban hills of Cedar Glen gave way to the flatter, industrial corridors leading toward the coast. The traffic got heavier. The signs for Silverport began to appear. Silverport 60 miles. My heart was racing. It wasn't just fear. It was adrenaline. I was driving toward a life I had built in my head for years but never believed I would touch. I was terrified. What if I wasn't good enough? What if they fired me in a week? What if I ended up sleeping in my car? But then I thought about the alternative. The alternative was the dinner table in Cedar Glen, shrinking every day until I disappeared completely. I needed coffee. My hands were starting to shake from the caffeine withdrawal and the stress. I pulled off at a rest stop about 40 miles outside of Silverport. It was a bleak concrete plaza with a few fast food chains and a gas station. I bought a large black coffee and sat at a picnic table near the parking lot. The wind was picking up, blowing trash across the pavement. I opened my laptop to check the address of the temporary Airbnb I had booked for the week. The laptop booted up. My desktop background was a photo of a geometric sculpture I admired. I clicked on the folder labeled Portfolio to double-check that I had the right files ready for Monday. As I clicked through the subfolders, my mouse hovered over a folder named Archive Old. I didn't remember what was in there. I clicked it open. Inside were hundreds of files, old sketches, scanned receipts, tax documents I had saved for the family business years ago, and there, sitting near the bottom, was a PowerPoint file. File name Vantagrid Pitch Deck Draft V4. PPTX date modified 6 months ago. I froze. My coffee cup hovered halfway to my mouth. I remembered this. 6 months ago. Gavin had come to my apartment late at night. He was panicked. He told me he was overwhelmed at work, that he had a presentation due for a potential client called Vantigrid Systems, and he didn't have the eye for the visuals. He had begged me to help him. Just make it look pretty. Liv, he had said. I have the data, but the slides look like trash. You are good at this artsy stuff. Please, I will owe you big time. I had stayed up for 3 nights straight. I didn't just make it look pretty. I had restructured the narrative flow. I had created custom infographics to explain the complex logistics data. I had designed a sleek, modern template that aligned with Vantigrid's branding. I had essentially built the visual identity of the pitch. When I sent it to him, he had replied with a text, "Thanks, looks decent." He never mentioned it again. I assumed he had used a few slides and moved on. I double-clicked the file. PowerPoint opened. The slides filled the screen. They were good. Even 6 months later, I could see the quality of the work. The color palette was sophisticated slate gray, electric blue, and white. The data visualization was crisp. Then, something clicked in my memory. At the party, during his speech, Gavin had mentioned Vantigrid. We just closed the Vantigrid Systems account, and I'm proud to say I led that charge. My stomach dropped. I quickly opened a browser window and tethered it to my phone's hotspot. I searched for Redwood Strategy Group Vantigrid Case Study. The search results loaded. There was a press release on the Redwood website from 2 weeks ago. Redwood Strategy Group secures strategic partnership with Vantigrid Systems. I clicked the link. There was a photo of Gavin shaking hands with a man in a suit. Below it was a link to a PDF view the winning strategy highlights. I downloaded the PDF. I opened it side by side with my PowerPoint file. It was identical. He hadn't just used the template. He hadn't just used the artsy stuff. He had used the entire deck, my charts, my copy, my strategic narrative structure. The only thing he had changed was the logo on the bottom right corner, where I had put a placeholder. He had stamped Redwood Strategy Group. He had built his promotion on my work. He had stood in that living room, holding a glass of champagne, and called me uneducated and worthless while standing on a pedestal constructed from my talent. He had mocked the very skills he had stolen to get there. I sat there at the picnic table, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry in the hot, fiery way I had been before. I felt something much colder settle in my chest. It was the clarity of a judge passing a sentence. I looked at the file. Date modified 6 months ago. The metadata would prove I created it on my computer, long before Redwood ever pitched it. I closed the laptop. I took a sip of my cold coffee. I wasn't just driving to Silverport to start a new job. I was driving to a crime scene, and I was carrying the smoking gun in my backpack. I got back into the car. I started the engine. The fear was gone. I put the car in drive and merged back onto the highway, pressing the accelerator until I was flying toward the skyline that was just beginning to rise in the distance. I was done running. It was time to hunt. Silverport was not just a city. It was a sensory assault. After 29 years of the suffocating, manicured silence of Cedar Glen, the noise of Silverport felt like a heartbeat I could finally sink mine to. The streets were a grid of steel and glass that seemed to scrape the sky, and the sidewalks were rivers of people moving with a terrifying, beautiful purpose. I stood on the corner of 4th and Main, clutching my laptop bag, watching the elevated train scream past overhead. I felt small. I felt invisible. But for the first time, I felt invisible because I was anonymous, not because I was ignored. Blue Peak Creative House was located in a converted textile factory in the Arts District. The elevator ride up to the 5th floor took forever, and with every floor that passed, my imposter syndrome tightened its grip around my throat. I kept waiting for someone to run out, point a finger at me, and shout that there had been a mistake, that the girl who dropped out of college to deliver auto parts had no business walking into a top-tier agency. But the doors opened, and no one shouted. The office was an open-plan expanse of exposed brick, reclaimed wood, and monitors the size of windshields. It smelled of espresso and expensive electronics. Olivia Dana Rourke was walking toward me, in person. She was even more formidable than on the screen. She wore a sharp blazer over a band t-shirt, balancing authority with approachability in a way I had never seen before. "You made it," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that suggested she did not suffer fools. "Welcome to the Thunderdome. Let me introduce you to the squad before we drown you in work." She led me through the rows of desks. I tried to walk tall, to mimic the confidence that seemed to radiate from the very walls of this place. "This is Miles," Dana said, pointing to a man with messy curls who was currently typing furiously while simultaneously eating a breakfast burrito. Miles spun his chair around. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright. "The fresh meat. Welcome. I am Miles, senior copywriter. I turn coffee into words. You must be the art director who is going to make my words look like they actually mean something." "I will try," I said, offering a nervous smile. "Don't try," Miles grinned. "Do. And if you need the good coffee, don't use the machine in the kitchen. Come find me. I have a secret stash." "And over here," Dana continued, guiding me to a corner desk where a woman with silver-streaked hair was marking up a printout with a red pen. "This is Renee. She is our lead strategist. She has been here since Blue Peak was just 2 people in a garage." Renee looked up. Her glasses were perched on the end of her nose. She studied me for a long, uncomfortable second. "Sanchez, Dana says you have a raw eye. Let us hope it is sharp too. We have a tight turnaround on the Delta account." "Nice to meet you, Renee," I said. "We will see," she said, but her tone wasn't malicious. It was just efficient. Then we reached a desk near the window. A man was sitting there, clicking a stylus against a tablet with rhythmic precision. He didn't look up immediately. "Jude," Dana said. "This is Olivia." Jude stopped clicking. He turned. He was immaculately dressed, looking like he had stepped out of a menswear catalog. He looked at me, then at my shoes, then at my face. "Hey," he said flatly. "I saw your portfolio. Interesting choice of typography on the cafe project." "Thank you," I said. "It wasn't a compliment," Jude said, turning back to his screen. "Serif fonts on a digital-first campaign are risky, but brave, I guess." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It was the first check. He was testing me. He knew I was self-taught, and he was marking his territory. "All right, settle in," Dana said, ignoring Jude's frostiness. "Your desk is next to Miles. You have an hour to set up your email, then come to my office. We have a client brief." The glow-up people talk about in movies involves a montage of shopping for clothes and getting a haircut. My glow-up involved sweat, panic, and staring at a screen until my eyes burned. My first assignment was not a glamour project. It was a layout refresh for a local organic fertilizer company called Earth First. It was unsexy, text-heavy, and had a deadline of 48 hours. "Don't mess it up," Renee told me as she handed over the brief. "They are a small client, but they are loyal. If the layout is messy, they walk." I treated that fertilizer brochure like it was the cover of Vogue. I stayed late that first night. The office emptied out around 7. I sat there, obsessing over the kerning of the headlines. I adjusted the color balance of the soil photos by increments of 1%. I remembered every insult my brother had thrown at me: uneducated, lazy, worthless, and I poured them into the work. I wasn't just designing. I was proving I had a right to exist in this chair. At 8:30, Miles walked by on his way out. "Whoa," he said, pausing behind my chair. "You are still here. It is just fertilizer. Olivia, it is literal poop dirt." "It needs to be perfect," I murmured, zooming in on a pixel that looked suspicious. "Okay," Miles said, dropping a granola bar on my desk. "Don't die. We need you for the staff meeting tomorrow." I worked until 10. I went home to my empty Airbnb, slept for 5 hours, and was back at my desk by 7 the next morning. I did this for 3 days. I soaked up everything. I listened to how Renee deconstructed a client's vague request into a concrete strategy. I watched how Jude, despite his attitude, used negative space to create tension in an image. I wasn't jealous. I was a sponge. I studied tutorials on my phone during my lunch break. I learned the keyboard shortcuts until my fingers danced across the keys without looking. On Friday afternoon, we presented the Earth First draft to the internal team. I projected my design onto the big screen in the conference room. My hands were shaking under the table. I expected Jude to tear it apart. I expected Renee to find a typo. There was silence in the room for 10 seconds. Then, Dana leaned forward. "This is clean," she said softly. "The hierarchy of information is intuitive, and that green you chose for the subheads, it pulls the whole thing together." She looked at me. "You didn't just organize the text, Olivia. You gave it a voice. That is a rare aesthetic eye." "It is adequate," Jude muttered. But he was nodding. "The alignment is solid." From Jude. That was practically a standing ovation. "Good job. Sanchez," Renee said, closing her notebook. "Send it to the client." I walked out of that meeting feeling lightheaded. It wasn't just the praise. It was the realization that for the first time in my life, I was being judged solely on my output, not my history. That afternoon, something shifted. "Hey, Olivia," Miles called out around 1 o'clock. "A bunch of us are going to the taco truck. You coming?" I looked up, surprised. In Cedar Glen, family dinners were obligatory torture sessions. No one invited me anywhere unless they needed a driver or a babysitter. "Me?" I asked. "No, the ghost behind you." Miles laughed. "Yes, you. Come on. Jude is buying because he lost a bet." I went. We stood on the sidewalk in the sun, eating spicy pork tacos. They complained about the traffic. They gossiped about a difficult client, and they asked me questions. "Where did you move from?" Renee asked. "A small town called Cedar Glen," I said. "Is it nice?" "It is quiet," I said. "Well, you are one of us now," Miles said, clinking his soda bottle against mine. "Welcome to the chaos. One of us." The words settled in my chest, warm and foreign. I had friends. I had colleagues. I had a place. But the past has a way of clawing at your ankles, just when you think you have climbed out of the pit. It was Saturday morning. I was sitting in a coffee shop near my new apartment. I had found a small, sunlit studio on the edge of the city, scrolling through social media. I had kept my promise to myself. I had not unblocked my family. I had not checked their profiles. I was clean. Then, a notification popped up on my phone. LinkedIn new message from Tessa Mallory. I frowned. I didn't know a Tessa Mallory. I tapped the icon. The profile photo showed a sharp-looking woman in business attire. Her current employer was listed as Redwood Strategy Group, my brother's firm. My stomach turned over. Had Gavin sent a minion to harass me? Was this some new game? I opened the message. "Hi, Olivia. You don't know me, but I work with your brother, Gavin, at Redwood. I was at the party last weekend. I saw what happened. I saw how he treated you. I hesitated to send this, but I can't sleep right knowing what I know. I have been working on the Vantagrid account with Gavin for 6 months. Or rather, I have been watching Gavin take credit for the Vantagrid account. I think your brother is building his career on stolen work. And I think the work he is stealing is yours. I have attached a few screenshots. I thought you should know." I sat frozen. The noise of the coffee shop faded away. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I clicked the attachment. It was a screenshot of an internal Redwood email chain. From Gavin Sanchez, to Senior Leadership Team Subject Vantagrid Proposal. Final deck attached is the pitch deck I developed over the weekend. I think this visual direction really captures the innovation we want to pitch. The date on the email was 5 months ago, but the second image was what made my blood run cold. It was a screenshot of the file properties of the attachment Gavin had sent. Tessa had right-clicked on the file and opened the Details tab. Author Olivia Sanchez, last modified, by Olivia Sanchez. He hadn't even scrubbed the metadata. He was so arrogant, so sure that I was worthless and unconnected to his world, that he hadn't even bothered to remove my name from the digital fingerprint of the file. I stared at the screen, the validation I had felt earlier in the week, the praise from Dana. The taco lunch with Miles suddenly felt fragile. My brother hadn't just mocked me. He hadn't just used me as a punchline. He had stolen the very talent he claimed I didn't have, used it to secure a promotion that paid him 3 times what I made, and then invited an audience to laugh at me for being a failure. I looked out the window at the busy street of Silverport. A minute ago, I was happy. Now, I was something else. I typed a reply to Tessa. My fingers were steady. Tessa, thank you for sending this. Can we meet? I hit send. I wasn't just a designer anymore. I was a woman holding the match that could burn down the house of Sanchez. And the wind was starting to pick up. The rain in Silverport was different from the rain in Cedar Glen. At home, rain meant mud in the driveway and the smell of damp earth rising from the garden my mother made me weed. Here, rain was a percussion instrument playing against the glass skyscrapers, washing the city in a sleek, cinematic gray. I sat in the back booth of a coffee shop called The Grind, 3 blocks from the Blue Peak office, watching the water streak the window. I was waiting for a ghost from a life I had already left behind. When Tessa Mallory walked in, she did not look like a villain. She looked exhausted. She was wearing a trench coat that was belted too tightly, shaking a wet umbrella with the frantic energy of someone who had been running on caffeine and anxiety for a decade. She scanned the room, spotted me, and hesitated. I raised a hand. She exhaled, a visible release of tension, and walked over. Olivia, she asked, sliding into the booth opposite me. Tessa, I replied. Thanks for meeting me. I have 45 minutes before I have to be on a conference call with a client who thinks a font change can fix a bankruptcy, she said, pulling a thick manila envelope from her bag. She placed it on the table between us. It sat there like an unexploded ordnance. Is that it? I asked. It is everything, Tessa said. Her voice was low, clipped. I printed it out. I did not want to leave a digital trail on the company server by sending you a zip file. I reached for the envelope, but Tessa put her hand on top of it. Before you open this, she said, looking me dead in the eye, you need to know why I am doing this. I don't know you, Olivia. I don't owe you anything, but I have worked at Redwood Strategy Group for 5 years. I have watched your brother climb the ladder by stepping on fingers. He steals ideas in meetings. He takes credit for junior associates' research. He is a vampire in a bespoke suit. She paused, her jaw tightening. But this, she tapped the envelope. This is different. Stealing from a coworker is standard corporate toxicity. Stealing from your own sister, using her love or her need for approval to build a career while mocking her to her face. That is a level of sociopathy I cannot stomach. I have a sister. Olivia, if I did to her what Gavin did to you, I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror. She removed her hand. I opened the envelope. The first page was a timeline. Tessa had constructed it with forensic precision. March 12th. Gavin emails, Olivia asking for help with visuals. March 15th. Olivia emails Gavin. Vantagrid pitch deck final, PPTX. March 16th. Gavin emails, Redwood Senior Partners. Subject: My strategic vision for Vantagrid, working draft. I stared at the dates. I remembered that week in March. I remembered Gavin calling me, his voice tight with fake panic. I am drowning. Liv, you are the only one who can make it look right. I remembered feeling a swell of pride. My big brother needed me. I remembered canceling a date, drinking 4 energy drinks, and obsessing over the color gradients until my eyes blurred. I thought I was buying a ticket back into his heart. I thought I was earning my place at the table. I flipped the page. It was a printout of an email Gavin had sent to the CEO of Redwood. Gavin Sanchez wrote, I stayed up the last 3 nights building this narrative from scratch. I really think this visual language captures the innovation we want to sell. It was a grind, but I think the result speaks for itself. He had claimed my sleepless nights as his own. He had claimed my grind. Keep going, Tessa said softly. I turned to the next page. It was a metadata report. Tessa had accessed the file properties of the deck on the company server. Author Olivia Sanchez. Total editing time: 34 hours. He was too lazy to even scrub the file properties, Tessa said. Or he was too arrogant. He probably thought, who is going to check? Who cares about Olivia? To him, you are not a person. You are a resource, like a printer or a coffee machine. I felt a cold numbness spreading through my limbs. It wasn't anger. It was the death of the last tiny hope I had been nurturing, the hope that maybe, deep down, he actually loved me but was just flawed. This wasn't a flaw. This was a predation. This deck, Tessa pointed to the printout of my slides. This is the reason he got the promotion. Vantigrid signed the contract based on this presentation. The client specifically mentioned the visual clarity of the strategy. You didn't just help him, Olivia. You made him. I closed the folder. The noise of the coffee shop rushed back in the hiss of the espresso machine. The murmur of conversations. What happens if I release this? I asked. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. If you send this to Redwood's ethics committee, Tessa shrugged. An investigation. Probably a quiet dismissal. Companies hate plagiarism, especially when it involves client confidentiality. He sent internal data to an outside civilian, that is you without an NDA. That alone is a fireable offense. He would be finished in the industry. And my family, I whispered. Your family will hate you, Tessa said brutally. They will say you ruined his life. They will say you were jealous. They will never believe he stole it. They will believe you set him up. You have to decide. Olivia, do you want justice, or do you want to keep the peace? I looked at the folder. Justice or peace? I had spent 29 years trying to keep the peace, and all it had gotten me was a seat in the corner and a public humiliation. Thank you. Tessa, I said. I need to think. Don't think too long, she said, standing up and buttoning her coat. Gavin is already looking for his next mark. He has been assigned to lead the implementation phase. If he screws that up, he will find someone else to blame, maybe me. She walked out into the rain, leaving me with the evidence that could nuke my family tree. I walked back to Blue Peak in a daze. The city felt sharper, the edges of the buildings more defined. I clutched the envelope against my chest. When I swiped my badge to enter the office, the energy was different. It was frantic. People were running between desks. Miles was pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. Sanchez. Dana's voice boomed from her glass-walled office. Get in here. Now. I dropped my bag at my desk, locked the envelope in my bottom drawer, and ran to Dana's office. Renee and Jude were already there. Renee looked serious. Jude looked annoyed, which was his default setting for challenged. Sit down, Dana said. She was pacing, a marker in her hand. We just got a massive RFP. Request for proposal. It came in an hour ago. She slapped a printed brief onto the table. Vantigrid Systems. The air left my lungs. They are looking for a new creative agency of record, Dana said, her eyes gleaming. They just hired a new consulting firm for their business strategy. Redwood something, and now they want a brand overhaul to match the new strategic direction. I sat frozen in the chair. Vantigrid, the company my brother was consulting for, the company he had won over using my slides. Here is the kicker, Dana continued, tapping the paper. The CMO of Vantigrid specifically referenced the aesthetic of their new strategic plan. They want that look. They want that clean, modern, data-driven minimalism. They said, and I quote, "We want the brand to feel like the strategy deck." I felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. They wanted the brand to look like the strategy deck, my deck. They loved my work so much they were hiring an agency to replicate it, not knowing the original artist was sitting in a room 300 miles away. Jude, Dana said, I know you usually lead the big pitches, but this style, this isn't you. You are too Baroque. Jude rolled his eyes. I can do minimal, Dana. Not like Olivia can, Dana said. She turned to me. Olivia, I saw your portfolio. I saw what you did with the Earth First project. You have this innate ability to make complex data look beautiful. It is exactly what Vantigrid is asking for. She slammed her hand on the table. Olivia, You are the lead art director on this pitch. Renee raised an eyebrow. She has been here a week. Dana, this is a multi-million-dollar contract. I trust her, Dana said. She has the eye. Olivia, can you do this? Could I lead a pitch to a client that my brother was currently managing? Could I present my own style to people who thought it belonged to him? Yes, I said. The word came out before I could stop it. I can do it. Good, Dana said. Now, the logistics. The pitch is on Friday, in person, at the Vantigrid headquarters. Where is that? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. Greystone, Virginia, Dana said. Greystone. It was a tech corridor about 40 minutes south of Cedar Glen. It was practically in my parents' backyard. We fly out Thursday night, Dana said. Pack your bags. Team, we are going to war. I walked back to my desk. My hands were shaking. Fate wasn't just knocking on my door. It was kicking it down with a steel-toed boot. I was going back. I was going to be in the same room as the client. Potentially the same room as Gavin. I sat down and unlocked my drawer. I touched the manila envelope. I had a weapon in the drawer, and I had a weapon in my brain. My phone rang. It wasn't a saved number. It was a generic Maryland area code. My heart skipped a beat. I thought about ignoring it, but instinct told me to answer. Hello. Olivia. It was my mother. She wasn't calling from her cell phone. She was calling from the landline, or maybe a neighbor's phone. That was why I hadn't blocked it. Mom, I said. My voice was flat. Finally, she snapped. There was no how are you, no, we miss you. Your father and I have been trying to reach you for days. Do you have any idea how childish you are being? I am at work, Mom, I said. I can't talk. You can listen, she said. We are throwing a party next weekend, a family unity barbecue. We invited the neighbors, the priest, and some of the Redwood partners. Why? I asked. To stop the gossip, she hissed. People are talking. Olivia, they are asking why you stormed out. They are asking if there is trouble. We need to show them that we are a solid, supportive family. We need you to come back and smile and act like a normal person. I can't, I said. I am working. Nonsense, she said. You can get a day off from whatever little agency you are at. And listen, since you have this new high-powered job you bragged about in your email, we expect you to contribute. The catering is going to cost $3,000. We expect you to cover half. Consider it your apology for the scene you caused. I sat there, staring at my computer screen where a blank Vantigrid file was open. They wanted me to come back to perform, to play the prop, and they wanted me to pay for the privilege. They wanted me to fund the very stage where they would continue to minimize me. $1,500. Olivia, she said, transfer it to your father's account by tomorrow. Something snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet sound of a tether being cut. No, I said. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence on the other end. Excuse me, she said, her voice dropping an octave. No, I repeated. I am not coming, and I'm not sending you money. You ungrateful little... I am not ungrateful, I interrupted, my voice steady, cold, and sharp as a scalpel. I am just done. I am done paying for parties where I am the punchline. I am done fixing problems I didn't create, and I am done apologizing for existing. If you don't do this, my mother threatened, don't bother coming back, ever. That is the plan. Mom, I said. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was trembling, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of liberation. I had said it. The world hadn't ended. The sky hadn't fallen. I looked at the empty screen in front of me. I pulled the keyboard closer. I didn't need to look for inspiration. I didn't need to search for a style. I knew exactly what Vantigrid wanted because I was the one who had created the language they fell in love with. I started to work. I worked with a ferocity that frightened me. I wasn't designing for a client anymore. I was designing a manifesto. I was going to Greystone. I was going to walk into that boardroom, and I was going to reclaim my name, pixel by pixel. Gavin thought he had won because he held the title. He didn't realize that titles are rented, but talent is owned, and he was about to find out that the rent was due. The alarm on my phone went off at 4:30 in the morning, in the darkness of the hotel room. The sound was not a jarring interruption, but a starting gun. I did not hit snooze. I sat up immediately, my feet hitting the cold carpet, my mind already running through the slide transitions I had memorized over the last 48 hours. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked different from the one who had cried in a sedan in a Cedar Glen driveway just 10 days ago. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were not pleading for approval. They were calculating. I brushed my hair back into a severe, polished bun. I applied my makeup with the precision of a restoration artist's sharp eyeliner. Matte lipstick, nothing to distract, everything to command. I put on the suit I had bought the day before with the first installment of my relocation stipend. It was charcoal gray, tailored to within an inch of its life. When I buttoned the blazer, I felt like I was sealing myself inside a tank. The Olivia who baked ceramics and apologized for taking up space was gone. The woman standing in her place was a weapon designed by Blue Peak, loaded with data and aimed at the heart of Vantigrid systems. I met the team in the lobby at 6. Dana was drinking a double espresso, scrolling through industry news on her tablet. Jude was pacing near the revolving doors, muttering about aspect ratios. Miles looked like he was vibrating, either from nerves or too much sugar. "How are we feeling?" Dana asked, looking up as I approached. "Ready," I said. My voice did not shake. The drive to Vantigrid headquarters took 20 minutes. The campus was a sprawling complex of glass and steel that looked less like an office park and more like a fortress for a Bond villain. We cleared security, clipped on our visitor badges, and were escorted to the executive wing. The conference room was cavernous. One wall was floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Virginia woodlands. The table was a slab of mahogany long enough to land a plane on. We set up in silence. I connected my laptop to the main projection system. The HDMI cable clicked into place with a satisfying snap. I opened the presentation. The title slide glowed on the massive screen, Vantigrid, the human algorithm. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doors opened. The Vantigrid execution team walked in. It was like watching a line of sharks entering a feeding ground. There was the CEO, a man named Sterling who looked like he chewed granite for breakfast. There was the head of legal, a woman with glasses so thick they magnified her skepticism. And there was the chief marketing officer, Elias, a man known in the industry for shredding agencies for sport. "You have 90 minutes, Sterling said, sitting at the head of the table. He did not smile. "Impress us." Dana did the introduction, her voice smooth and professional, but she handed the floor to me within 5 minutes. "I will let our lead art director walk you through the vision," Dana said, stepping back. I stood up. I walked to the front of the room. I felt Jude's eyes on me, waiting for the stumble. I felt the weight of the imposter syndrome trying to crawl up my throat, but I shoved it down. "Gentlemen, ladies," I began. "You hired a strategy firm, Redwood, to build a logic for your future. They gave you the numbers. They gave you the skeleton. We are here to give you the skin, the muscle, and the heart." I clicked the clicker. The screen changed. For the next hour, I didn't just speak. I performed. I walked them through the brand architecture. I showed them how we took the rigid data structures, the very ones I had secretly designed for Gavin 6 months ago, and softened them into a visual language that consumers could trust. I saw the recognition in their eyes. They didn't know why it felt so familiar, but they felt it. It resonated because it was cut from the exact same cloth as the strategy they had already bought. I was harmonizing with my own stolen work. "Wait," Elias interrupted. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "Go back 1 slide." I froze. This was the test. I clicked back. "This color palette," Elias said, pointing a gold pen at the screen. "It is stark. Most energy companies go for greens and blues. You are pitching slate and electric amber. Why? The room went silent. Miles stopped breathing. This was the kind of question that killed pitches. If I said, because it looks cool, we were dead. Because you are not an energy company anymore, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You are a data company that transmits power. Green is for the companies that grow things. Blue is for the companies that preserve things. Amber is for the companies that ignite things. Your new strategy is about aggression and speed. Your color needs to be a warning signal, not a lullaby. Elias stared at me. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. 10. Then, he slowly uncapped his pen and made a note on his pad. Continue, he said. I didn't exhale. I just kept going. I fielded questions about font licensing, about cross-platform integration, about the psychological impact of the logo curvature. I answered them all. I didn't answer them like a junior employee. I answered them like the person who owned the intellectual property in the room. When I reached the final slide, a mock-up of their headquarters with the new branding lit up against the night sky, I set the clicker down. That is the future of Vantigrid, I said. Thank you. The lights came up. Sterling, the CEO, sat back in his chair. He looked at Dana. Then he looked at Jude. Finally, his gaze landed on me. We have seen 4 agencies this week, Sterling said. Big names from New York, Chicago. He paused. None of them understood the core of our new strategic direction, he said. They all tried to change us. You seem to understand the DNA of this pivot better than my own board does. The CMO, Elias, nodded in agreement. It is seamless. It is like this visual language was born from the same mind that wrote our operational strategy. This is the direction we have been waiting for. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Born from the same mind. If only they knew. Dana stood up, beaming. We are glad you feel that way. We packed up our gear. The handshake line was warm. Sterling actually shook my hand with both of his. Excellent work, Ms. Sanchez. Truly. As we walked out of the conference room, the adrenaline that had been holding me upright began to crash into euphoria. Olivia, Jude said, falling into step beside me. He didn't look at me, but he adjusted his glasses. That answer about the amber color, that was solid. You handled him well. I looked at Jude. A compliment from him was worth 10 from anyone else. Thanks, Jude. Don't let it go to your head, he grunted. But I saw the corner of his mouth twitch upward. We reached the main lobby. It was a massive atrium with polished marble floors and a security desk that looked like mission control. I need to use the restroom before we head to the airport, Dana said. Meet me by the main exit in 10 minutes. Sure, I said. I stood near the turnstiles, checking my phone. I had 3 missed texts from Miles, sending me fire emojis from the back seat of the rental car outside. I was smiling. I felt light. I felt like I had finally exorcised the ghost of the Cedar Glen living room. I turned to walk toward the exit, my head still in the clouds, and I slammed right into someone walking in from the visitor entrance. Whoa, watch it, the man snapped, dropping a brown leather folder. Papers slid across the marble floor. I am so sorry, I said, instinctively crouching down to help him gather the documents. I wasn't looking where I was. I grabbed a resume from the floor. I saw the name at the top, Mark D. Henderson. My hand froze. I looked up. The man was crouching opposite me, reaching for the same paper. Our eyes met. It was Mark, my cousin, or rather, my second cousin, Gavin's best friend since high school, the one who had sat on the sofa at the promotion party, nursing a beer, and laughing so hard he choked when Gavin called me a professional family dependent. Mark went white. It wasn't a gradual pale. The color drained from his face as if someone had pulled a plug. He stared at me. He stared at my charcoal suit. He stared at the visitor badge clipped to my lapel that read Blue Peak, VIP access. Olivia, he choked out. I stood up slowly, holding his resume. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his folder like a shield. He was wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, and he looked sweaty. He looked small. "Hi, Mark," I said. My voice was calm. "What are you doing here?" he stammered. He looked around the lobby as if expecting security to drag me away. "Did you follow Gavin here? You know he's in a meeting upstairs, right? You can't just stalk him because you are mad about the party." I almost laughed. The narcissism of their circle was a closed loop. Everything had to be about them. "I am not here for Gavin," I said. "Then why?" He looked at my badge again. "Blue Peak. What is that? Are you a secretary or something?" Before I could answer, the elevator banks behind us chimed. A group of executives walked out. It was Elias, the CMO of Vantigrid, flanked by 2 assistants. He was heading for the exit, probably for a lunch meeting. He spotted me standing there. "Olivia!" Elias called out. His voice boomed across the lobby. Mark flinched. He looked at the Vantigrid executive, then back at me. Elias walked right up to us. He ignored Mark completely. "I just wanted to catch you before you left," Elias said, extending a hand. "I was thinking about what you said regarding the rollout timeline. I think you're right. We should accelerate the digital phase. I am going to tell the CEO we should prioritize Blue Peak for the final contract. Expect a call on Monday." "Thank you, Elias," I said, shaking his hand firmly. "We will be ready." "Safe travels," Elias said. He nodded to me and swept out the revolving doors. Silence descended on the space between Mark and me. Mark's mouth was slightly open. He looked like his brain was trying to reboot, but the hard drive was corrupted. He looked at the door where the CMO had exited. He looked at me. "He knows your name," Mark whispered. "That was the chief marketing officer." "I know," I said. "But Gavin said—" Mark trailed off. "Gavin said you were unemployed. He said you were barely functioning." "Gavin says a lot of things," I said. I handed Mark his resume. It felt flimsy in my hand. "You are here for an interview." Mark nodded dumbly. "Junior analyst role." Gavin put in a good word. "Well," I said, smoothing down the front of my blazer, "it is a tough room upstairs. Mark, they value originality. Make sure you have some." Mark didn't move. He just stared at me as if I were a shapeshifter who had assumed the form of his friend's victim. "Good luck," I said. I walked past him. I didn't look back. I stepped into the revolving door and pushed. As I emerged into the cool air of the parking lot, where Dana and the team were waiting, a cold realization settled over me. Mark would call Gavin. He wouldn't wait. He would call him from the parking lot. He would tell him that Olivia Sanchez was not crying in a bedroom in Cedar Glen. He would tell him that Olivia Sanchez was wearing a $1,000 suit and shaking hands with the clients Gavin was terrified of. The element of surprise was gone. The family would know. But as I climbed into the SUV and the driver pulled away from the curb, I realized I didn't care. Let them know. Let them be confused. Let them be afraid. They thought I was the dirt they walked on. Now, they were about to find out I was the earthquake. Monday morning at Blue Peak did not start with coffee. It started with the pop of a cork. When I walked into the office, the air was thick with the smell of victory. Dana was standing on top of her desk, literally standing on the expensive reclaimed wood, holding a bottle of champagne in one hand and a signed contract in the other. "We got it!" she shouted, her voice echoing off the exposed brick walls. "Vantigrid is ours!" The room erupted. Miles threw a stack of papers into the air. Jude actually smiled, which was a terrifying sight in itself. People were clapping, cheering, and high-fiving, but as I stood there, clutching my bag, the room seemed to pivot toward me. "And," Dana yelled over the noise, hopping down from the desk, "we need to acknowledge the person who unlocked the door. The client specifically requested that Olivia Sanchez lead the creative direction for the entire rollout." She walked over to me and handed me a glass of champagne. The bubbles fizzed against my nose. "To Olivia," Dana said, "our new Associate Creative Director." I stood frozen. Associate Creative Director. It was a title that usually took 10 years to earn. I had done it in 2 weeks. "And with that title," Dana whispered, leaning in so only I could hear, comes a salary adjustment. You are now making $120,000 a year, plus performance bonuses. $120,000. I took a sip of the champagne. It tasted like sunlight. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the burden, I wasn't the expense, I was the rainmaker. By Wednesday, the news had broken containment. Adweek ran a digital feature on the Vantagrid rebrand. They included a photo of the Blue Peak team. There I was, standing next to Dana and the Vantagrid CEO, wearing my charcoal suit, looking sharp, competent, and undeniably real. The caption read, "Breakout Talent. Olivia Sanchez brings a fresh, data-driven aesthetic to the energy sector." I shared the article on my LinkedIn. I didn't add a caption. The headline was enough. Then, the silence from Cedar Glen broke, but it didn't break with applause. It broke with a whisper campaign that was so vicious, so calculated, that it took my breath away. It started with a message from an old high school friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey Liv, I saw your post. Congrats." I was confused though. "I ran into Gavin at the grocery store yesterday, and he said you were staying at a mental health facility in Silverport. He said you were having a break from reality. Is everything okay?" I stared at the screen. My hands curled into fists. A mental health facility, a break from reality. Gavin saw the article. He saw the success. And because his ego could not process a world where I was superior to him, he had rewritten the script. He couldn't deny I was in Silverport. So he changed the reason. I wasn't there as a rising star. I was there as a patient. He was telling people that the job, the article, the success, it was all a delusion, a fabrication of a sick mind. He was pathologizing my success to protect his mediocrity. I didn't reply to the friend. I simply closed the app. But the messages kept trickling in. Cousins, neighbors, people who had been at the party. They were all checking in on poor Olivia, asking if I needed help, if I was taking my medication. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. He was turning my victory into a symptom. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I assumed it was a vendor for the Vantagrid project, so I answered in my professional voice. "This is Olivia." "So, it is true." The voice was unmistakable. It was my mother, but she sounded different. She didn't sound angry, and she didn't sound affectionate. She sounded frightened. "Mom," I asked, "how did you get this number?" "I used your Aunt Linda's phone," she said quickly. "She doesn't know. Listen to me. Olivia, I saw the magazine thing, the article on the internet." "Okay," I said. "And is it real?" she asked. Her voice dropped to a hush. "Or did you pay someone to make that Gavin says you are having episodes? He says you are making things up to get attention because you were embarrassed at the party. He says Blue Peak isn't a real company." I felt a cold laugh bubble up in my chest. It was absurd. "Mom," I said, leaning back in my leather office chair, looking out at the skyline of Silverport. "I am sitting in my office. I just signed a contract worth $3 million for the agency. My salary is double what Gavin makes. It is real. It has always been real. The only thing that was fake was your belief that I was useless." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing. I could hear the gears in her head turning, grinding against the rust of her denial. "But Gavin is the successful one," she murmured. "He is the consultant." "Gavin is a fraud," I said. "And sooner or later, everyone is going to know." "Don't say that," she snapped, her old reflex kicking in. "Don't you dare speak about your brother like that. We have to fix this." "There is nothing to fix," I said. "I am doing great. You can tell the neighbors I am not in a psych ward. I am in the C-suite." "No, you don't understand," she said, her voice rising in panic. "The neighbors are asking questions. Robert saw the article. He asked Dad why we didn't mention your big promotion. He asked why Gavin said you were sick. It is getting messy. Olivia, people are confused. We look disjointed. Not I am proud of you. Not I am sorry we lied about you. Just fear that the family portrait was cracking." "That sounds like a you problem," I said. Olivia, listen, she said, her tone shifting into that commanding matriarchal register she used when she wanted to mobilize the troops. Your father's 60th birthday is next Saturday. We are combining it with a celebration for the Redwood Partnership. Everyone will be there. The partners from Redwood, the neighbors, the family. I am not coming, I said. You have to, she insisted. If you don't come, people will believe Gavin's story that you are crazy. If you do come, and you look successful, then we can just say we were being humble. We can spin it, but we need you there. We need to show a united front. We cannot have people thinking this family is at war. So you want me to come back just to make you look good? I asked. To prove I am sane so you don't look like liars. I want you to come home because you are my daughter, she said. But the words felt hollow, like a script she was reading from a teleprompter. And because if you really are doing as well as you say, you should be gracious enough to share it with us. I closed my eyes. Gracious. They wanted my grace after feeding me cruelty for a decade. But then, a thought occurred to me. If I stayed away, Gavin won. If I stayed in Silverport, his narrative would stand. He would tell everyone I was too unstable to travel, or that I was ashamed. He would continue to build his career on my slide deck while painting me as the tragic, broken sister. But if I walked into that party, not as the girl in the homemade dress, but as the associate creative director of Blue Peak, if I walked in there with the truth, there were going to be Redwood partners there, the very people Gavin had lied to, the very people who believed he was a visionary genius. My mother was handing me the stage. She thought she was inviting me back to be a prop in her united family tableau. She didn't realize she was inviting the executioner to the feast. Fine, I said. Really? She sounded relieved. Oh, good. That is good. Now, wear something appropriate. Nothing too flashy. We don't want to upstage your father. And please, Olivia, bring a check. We are still short on the catering. I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed the red button. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the office. I wasn't going to bring a check. I was going to bring something much more expensive. My computer pinged. A secure message from Tessa. I opened it. Tessa, I heard about the party. Gavin is panicking. He is trying to get the Redwood partners to skip it, but the CEO insists on coming to honor your dad. Gavin is terrified you will show up. Me, I am showing up. Tessa. Good, because I found something else. It isn't just the slide deck. I leaned closer to the screen. Tessa, I was digging through the shared archives. I found a folder titled External Resources. It is Gavin's personal stash. It is full of PDF scans. Olivia, he has an entire collection of your work going back 3 years. Logos you did for freelance clients. Layouts you posted on your portfolio site. He has been using them as inspiration for other clients. But that is not the worst part. Me. What is the worst part, Tessa? There is a disciplinary file from his second year. He was flagged for misrepresentation of data. He almost got fired. He blamed it on an intern. He threw a 20-year-old kid under the bus to save his own skin. The intern was fired. Gavin was promoted. Tessa. He has a pattern. He uses people as fuel. You were just the biggest log on the fire. I read the message twice. He had almost destroyed a stranger's life to save his own career. And he had been harvesting my creativity for years, stockpiling it like ammunition, all while telling our parents I was doing nothing on my computer. Every insult he had hurled at me, lazy, unmotivated, useless, was a projection. He was the one who couldn't create. He was the one who couldn't work. He was a parasite in a 3-piece suit. I typed back, me. Can you get me the file, Tessa? I can get you a copy. But if you use it, I might lose my job for leaking internal documents. I paused. I couldn't ask her to do that. I couldn't be like Gavin. Me. Don't send the file. Just tell me who the intern was. I will find the rest. Tessa. His name was David Lynn. He works at a coffee shop in Cedar Glen now. He never got back into the industry. I stared at the name, David Lynn, another ghost in Gavin's graveyard. I checked the calendar. The party was in 5 days. I stood up and walked over to Dana's office. She was on a call, but she waved me in. She covered the mouthpiece. "What is up, superstar?" "I need to take a personal day next Friday," I said, "and I need to borrow the high-resolution projector. The portable one." Dana raised an eyebrow. "Going to a movie night?" "Something like that," I said. "I am going to a birthday party." "Must be a hell of a party if you need a 4K projector." Dana laughed. "Take it. Just bring it back in one piece." "I will," I said. "I can't promise the same for the party." I walked back to my desk. I had 5 days to build the ultimate presentation. I wasn't pitching a brand this time. I was pitching the truth. And my audience wasn't just my parents. It was the Redwood Strategy Group. I opened a new slide deck. I chose a black background. I typed the title in bold. White letters. The Cost of Silence. A case study. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. Let them spread their rumors. Let them call me crazy. When I was done with them, the only thing people would be questioning was how they had been blind for so long. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for a coffee shop in Cedar Glen. "Hi," I said when the barista answered. "I am looking for an employee named David. Is he working today?" It was time to assemble the witnesses. The conference room at Blue Peak was quiet. The only sound was the hum of the HVAC system and the soft scratching of Renee's pen against a legal pad. It was 7 in the evening on a Tuesday. The rest of the office had gone home, but the war room was fully operational. I sat at the head of the table. In front of me lay the autopsy of my brother's career. It was a sprawling timeline I had taped together, spanning 3 years of emails, file transfers, and metadata reports that Tessa had risked her job to smuggle out to me. Dana stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. She turned to me, her face serious. "You know," she said, her voice devoid of its usual playful sarcasm, "if you do this, Olivia, there is no going back. You are not just exposing a liar. You are nuking a bridge. Corporate America is small. People talk. You need to make sure that when the dust settles, you are the one holding the fire extinguisher, not the matches." "I know," I said. "That is why I need to know how to do it without looking like the hysterical little sister." Renee stopped writing. She pushed her glasses up her nose and tapped the legal pad. "Emotion is your enemy," Renee said. "The moment you cry, you lose. The moment you scream, you lose. The moment you make this about feelings or betrayal, they will dismiss you as a family dispute. Men like the partners at Redwood Strategy Group deal in hard assets. They deal in liability. You have to present Gavin not as a bad brother, but as a liability to their firm." "Liability," I repeated. "Exactly," Dana added, walking over to the table. "Don't gawk at the wreckage. Just present the flight recorder data. Let the papers speak. If the papers say he stole intellectual property, then he is a thief. If the papers say he lied to a client, he is a fraud. You are just the messenger delivering the audit." I looked down at the evidence. I had organized it into 3 clear sections. Exhibit A, the Vantagrid pitch. This included the original PowerPoint file from my hard drive, dated 6 months ago. It included the email I sent to Gavin. It included the final PDF Gavin sent to his bosses, which was a carbon copy of my work, right down to the pixel. Exhibit B, the pattern of behavior. This was the information about David Lynn, the intern Gavin had scapegoated 2 years ago. I had tracked David down. He was working as a barista, just as Tessa had said. He had sent me a notarized statement about how Gavin had pressured him to falsify data and then fired him when the discrepancy was flagged. Exhibit C, the External Resources folder. This was the collection of my freelance work Gavin had been hoarding on the Redwood server, using my designs as a clip art library for his other clients. "It is solid," Renee said, reviewing the stack, "but you need legal cover. If you walk into that party and start throwing accusations, he could sue you for defamation. He could claim you hacked his accounts." "I didn't hack anything," I said. "Tessa sent this anonymously, And the rest is from my own computer. Doesn't matter, Renee said. Rich men love lawsuits. It is how they bully the truth into silence. The next morning, I met with a labor attorney Dana knew. His name was Mr. Sterling, no relation to the Vantigrid CEO. He was a sharp, terrifyingly calm man who charged $400 an hour, but agreed to see me as a favor to Dana. We sat in his office, which smelled of old leather and expensive cologne. I laid out the plan. I told him about the party. I told him about the Redwood partners being there. Here is the rule, Mr. Sterling said, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, but you must be precise. Do not say, Gavin is a thief. That is a character judgment. Say, Gavin submitted a file on March 16th that was created on my computer on March 12th. That is a fact. Do not say, Gavin is a liar. Say, the metadata contradicts his statement of authorship. Keep it clinical. Keep it boring. Boring is safe. I can be boring, I said. And one more thing, Mr. Sterling added. Do not ask for anything. Do not ask for money. Do not ask for an apology. If you ask for something, it looks like extortion. If you simply present the information and walk away, it looks like a public service. You are just a concerned citizen clearing the record. I left his office feeling like I was wearing armor. I wasn't going to Cedar Glen to fight. I was going to Cedar Glen to testify. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a secure message from Tessa. Tessa, bad news. The timeline has moved up. My stomach tightened. Me. What do you mean, Tessa? The partners are so impressed with the Vantigrid win, thanks to your work, that they are planning to announce Gavin's promotion to junior partner next month. But before that, they are assigning him to Project Apex. I didn't know what Project Apex was, but the name sounded ominous. Tessa. It is a government contract, massive security clearance. If Gavin gets assigned to Apex, the firm will lock ranks around him. He will be untouchable. They will bury any accusation to protect the security clearance. You have to stop him before he signs that contract. Once he is on Apex, he is gone. Me. When does he sign? Tessa. Monday morning. My parents' party was on Saturday. I had 48 hours. If I waited until after the weekend, Gavin would be shielded by a wall of federal security clearance and corporate lawyers. The party wasn't just a social event anymore. It was the only window of opportunity I had to shoot down the missile before it reached orbit. And the guest list was playing right into my hands. My mother had confirmed that 2 senior partners from Redwood would be attending the Family Unity barbecue. They were coming because they thought they were celebrating a prodigy. They thought they were honoring the family that produced a genius. They were going to be sitting in the front row. I went back to my desk and opened my laptop. I needed a second. Digital failsafe. I navigated to the Redwood Strategy Group's external ethics reporting portal. It was a generic form usually used for reporting minor HR violations. I didn't use the form. I found the direct email address for the global head of ethics and the chief human resources officer. I composed a new email. Subject: formal whistleblower complaint regarding Gavin Sanchez. Intellectual property. Theft and code of conduct violations. I attached the timeline. I attached the side-by-side comparison of the slide decks. I attached David Lynn's statement. I attached the metadata reports. I wrote a brief, clinical cover letter, using the exact phrasing Mr. Sterling had suggested. To the Ethics Committee. Please find attached evidence demonstrating that the strategic materials submitted by Gavin Sanchez for the Vantigrid account were not authored by him, but were misappropriated from an external source without consent or compensation. Furthermore, the attached documentation regarding former employee David Lynn suggests a pattern of unethical behavior. I am submitting this for your review to ensure the integrity of your firm's output. I didn't hit send. I saved it to my drafts. This was the nuclear option. If the confrontation at the party failed, if Gavin managed to talk his way out of it, or if the partners refused to listen, I would press the button, but I wanted them to see it in person first. I wanted to see their faces when they realized they had bet the farm on a horse that couldn't run. Now, I needed backup. I couldn't go alone. If I walked into that house by myself, the gravity of my family's dysfunction would crush me. My mother would guilt me. My father would shout, and I would revert to being the little girl who just wanted them to stop yelling. I needed an anchor, someone who reminded me that I was Olivia from Blue Peak, not Olivia the disappointment. I turned to the desk next to me. Miles was eating a bagel and watching a video about typography. "Miles," I said. He spun around. "What is up? You have that look in your eye. The scary one. Are you free this Saturday?" "Depends," he said. "Are we robbing a bank?" "Worse," I said. "We are going to a barbecue at my parents' house in Cedar Glen." Miles dropped his bagel. "The parents. The ones who think you are in a mental ward." "The same," I said. "I need a driver, and I need a witness. Someone to stand there and look professional so they can't claim I am hallucinating. Also, if things go south, I need someone to start the car." Miles wiped his hands on a napkin. He looked at me, really looked at me, and saw the tension radiating off my shoulders. "I will wear my best suit," he said, "and I will bring the car. I have a getaway vehicle. It is a Honda Civic, so it is not fast, but it is reliable." "Thank you, Miles." "Don't mention it," he said. "I love a good family drama. It makes my own family look normal." Friday night arrived. The preparation was complete. I had my outfit laid out. It wasn't the charcoal suit from the pitch. That was for business. This was for a funeral, the funeral of my brother's reputation. I chose a sleek, black dress that looked expensive, paired with a sharp white blazer. It was modern, successful, and undeniably adult. I had the projector in the trunk of Miles's car. I had the flash drive in my purse. I had the statement printed out on a single index card, folded in my pocket. I sat on the edge of my bed in my Silverport apartment. The city lights were twinkling outside. I thought about the little girl who used to hide in the pantry when her father was angry. I thought about the young woman who worked double shifts at a diner to save a business that would never be hers. I thought about the sister who stayed up for 3 nights to make a slide deck because she thought love was something you could earn through labor. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge is hot and messy. Revenge is throwing a drink in someone's face. This was a correction. Gavin had broken the contract. He had broken the unspoken agreement that family does not consume family. He had tried to eat me alive to feed his own ambition. He had made a mistake, though. He thought I was just food. He forgot that even the smallest prey has teeth. I checked my phone one last time. The draft email was sitting there, waiting. To Redwood Ethics Committee. Status unsent. I closed the laptop. "Tomorrow," I whispered to the empty room. I laid down, but I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the traffic, counting the hours until I would drive back into the past to burn it down so the future could finally grow. The gravel of my parents' driveway crunched under the tires of Miles's Honda Civic. It was a familiar sound, one that used to trigger a Pavlovian response of anxiety and dread. Today, however, it sounded like the drum roll before an execution. I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. The woman looking back was not the frantic, disheveled sister who had fled this house 10 days ago. My black dress was tailored and sharp, intersected by a white blazer that glowed in the afternoon sun. My hair was pulled back. My lipstick was a shade of red that meant business. "You good?" Miles asked, from the driver's seat. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He was wearing his best suit, which was slightly too large in the shoulders. But he looked respectable. He looked like an ally. "I am fine," I said. "Remember the plan. You are my colleague. You are here to assist. If anyone asks, you are just handling the logistics." "Logistics," Miles repeated. "Got it. I have the bag. I have the keys. I am ready to run." We stepped out of the car. The scene was almost a carbon copy of the promotion party. But with a higher budget, the front lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. There was a tent set up in the backyard, white linen fluttering in the breeze. The air smelled of expensive catering, roasted meats, and truffle oil. But the moment I walked through the front door, I felt the shift. 10 days ago, when I walked in here, the eyes that landed on me were filled with pity, dismissal, or amusement. I was the stain on the rug. I was the error code in the family program. Today, the heads turned, but the gaze was different. It was predatory. It was assessing. It was the way a collector looks at a dusty painting they suddenly realize is an original master. They didn't see Olivia the failure. They saw Olivia the asset. They saw a salary they could brag about, a title they could leverage, and a success story they could steal. My mother was on me before I even reached the foyer. She emerged from the crowd of neighbors like a heat-seeking missile. "Olivia," she breathed out. She didn't hug me. She reached out and smoothed the lapel of my blazer, her hands lingering as if checking the quality of the fabric. "You came, and you brought a guest." "This is Miles," I said coolly. "My associate from Blue Peak." "Deeply charmed," Miles said, offering a polite nod. My mother barely glanced at him. Her eyes were fixed on me. They were hard, calculating eyes masked by a layer of frantic hospitality. She leaned in close, the smell of her heavy floral perfume filling my nose. "You look expensive," she whispered. "Good. That is good. Listen to me. Olivia, everyone is here. The Johnsons, the Millers, and Gavin's partners from the firm. We are not going to talk about the misunderstanding from the last party. We are going to let people think what they want. You are just here to support your brother. You are the dutiful sister who is doing well. That is the story. Do not deviate." It wasn't a request. It was a command. You are a prop. Stand there and shine, but don't speak unless it enhances the brand. "I understand, Mom," I said. "I am here to set the record straight." She mistook my meaning. She smiled, a tight, relieved grimace. "Exactly. Now, go say hello. And for heaven's sake, smile." "You look so severe." I walked into the main living room. It was packed. The same people who had laughed at Gavin's uneducated and worthless joke were now holding cocktails and murmuring in hushed tones. As I moved through the crowd, the conversation stopped. "Is that her? I heard she got a huge contract. Gavin said she was in a facility. Well, she doesn't look crazy. She looks corporate." I didn't engage. I just nodded. A slight, regal inclination of my head. I let them be confused. Then, the crowd parted, and Gavin appeared. He looked perfect. He was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. His hair was coiffed, his teeth were bleached, and he was radiating the golden aura of a man who believes he is the protagonist of the universe. When he saw me, he didn't flinch. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look afraid. He looked like a showman who had just spotted a way to elevate the second act. "Liv," he boomed. He strode across the room and wrapped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me into a side hug that was half embrace, half headlock. It was a display of dominance. He was showing the room that he still owned me, that my success was encompassed within his sphere of influence. "I knew you would make it," he said, loudly enough for the back of the room to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, my little sister, the creative genius." A ripple of polite applause went through the room. Gavin squeezed my shoulder. His fingers dug in hard. He leaned down, his voice dropping to a hiss right in my ear. "Nice suit," he whispered. "Glad you decided to drop the drama and play along. Mom told me you finally grew up. Don't make me regret letting you in here." I turned my head and looked him in the eye. I didn't pull away. I didn't smile. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, Gavin," I said. "It is a big day for you." He took that as submission. He grinned, slapped me on the back, and turned back to the crowd. "She is shy," he laughed. "Always has been, but we are working on it." He moved away to greet a newcomer, leaving me standing near the buffet table. "He has no idea. Does he?" Miles muttered, appearing at my elbow with a plate of shrimp he wasn't eating. "None," I said. "He thinks he is invincible." A heavy hand landed on my arm. I turned to see Uncle Jerry, a man who had spent the last 5 years asking me when I was going to get a real job every Christmas. "Well, look at you," Jerry sneered, his breath smelling of gin. "Fancy job in the city. Huh, I guess that community college stuff finally paid off. Don't forget who fed you when you were broke, girl. Now that you have money, you should think about paying your parents back for all those years you lived here for free. I looked at him. I remembered the nights I worked at the diner to pay the utility bills, so Uncle Jerry could come over and watch football on a TV that wasn't disconnected. I haven't forgotten anything, Jerry, I said. My memory is excellent. In fact, that is exactly why I'm here. I walked away before he could respond. I scanned the room. I was looking for the target. And then I saw him. Standing near the French doors that led to the garden was a man in a gray suit. He looked serious, with silver hair and the posture of someone who signs checks with many zeros. He was talking to my father. It was Marcus Thorne, senior partner at Redwood Strategy Group, the man who held Gavin's future in his hands. My father was gesturing wildly, playing the role of the proud patriarch. He pointed at Gavin, then he pointed at me. Thorne nodded, looking impressed. He was buying the narrative. He was buying the lie that the Sanchez family was a factory of talent, a wholesome, supportive unit that produced brilliance. My mother scurried over to them. She said something to Thorne, laughed, and then gestured for everyone to move to the garden. Speeches, she chirped. Time for speeches. The crowd migrated outside. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. A small stage had been set up near the gazebo, complete with a microphone and a sound system. I stood at the back, near the rose bushes. Miles stood next to me, clutching the black bag that contained the projector. Wait for the signal, I whispered. I am ready, Miles said. Gavin hopped onto the stage. He tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. Testing, he said. Can everyone hear me? Cheers. Applause. My mother stood in the front row, clasping her hands together, beaming. My father stood next to Marcus Thorne, looking like he had just won the lottery. Thank you all for coming, Gavin began. He adopted a humble, earnest tone. Today is about celebrating my father's 60th birthday, but it is also about something bigger. It is about legacy. He paused for effect. At Redwood Strategy Group, we talk a lot about value, about building structures that last. And I have learned that the strongest structures aren't built of concrete. They are built of blood. They are built of family. He looked out at the crowd, making eye contact with the key players. I have had a good year, Gavin said. We closed the Vantagrid deal. We are moving into government contracts. But I didn't do it alone. I stand here because I had a foundation. I had parents who pushed me. And he turned and pointed directly at me. I had a sister who, even when she was struggling, reminded me of why we work so hard. You know, Olivia and I have had our ups and downs. She took a long time to find her path. There were years where we had to carry her. Years where we had to support her while she figured out who she was. My blood ran cold. Carry me. I paid the mortgage. I nursed our father. I sacrificed my degree. But, Gavin continued, his voice swelling with magnanimity, that is what family does. We lift each other up, and I am proud to say that thanks to the guidance and the example we set in this house, Olivia has finally landed on her feet. She has a little job at an agency now, and I like to think that watching her big brother operate gave her the blueprint she needed. He smiled a benevolent, condescending smile. So, I want to dedicate this success to the Sanchez name, to the support system that allows greatness to flourish. The crowd applauded. Marcus Thorne was clapping enthusiastically. My mother was wiping a tear. They were eating it up. The lie was perfect. It was seamless. He had taken my sacrifice, twisted it into charity, and used it to polish his own halo. He was erasing me while I stood right there. My mother turned and caught my eye. She made a small, sharp gesture with her hand. Smile, clap. My father looked at me, his eyes hard. Stay still. Don't ruin this. They thought I was trapped. They thought the social pressure, the presence of the VIPs, and the family honor would keep me silent. They were banking on my shame, but they had forgotten one thing. I wasn't ashamed anymore. I took a step forward. Where are you going? A neighbor whispered as I pushed past her. I didn't answer. I kept walking. The applause was dying down. Gavin was starting to step away from the mic. I walked out of the shadows of the rose bushes. My heels clicked on the paving stones of the patio. The sound was distinct. Heads turned. Gavin saw me coming. For a second, he looked annoyed. He thought I was coming to give a sappy thank you Gavin speech. He thought I was coming to kiss the ring. "Ah," Gavin said into the mic. "And here she is. Olivia, did you want to say a few words?" He held out the microphone, a smirk playing on his lips. He was so sure of his control. He was daring me to speak, confident that I would only echo his narrative. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. I took the microphone from his hand. The feedback whined for a split second, a high-pitched screech that made everyone wince. I stood there, center stage. I looked at my mother, whose face had gone pale. She was mouthing the word no. I looked at my father, who was starting to step forward aggressively. I looked at Marcus Thorne. He was watching with polite interest. Then, I looked at Gavin, up close. I could see the sweat on his forehead. I could see the moment the doubt entered his eyes. He saw something in my face that hadn't been there 10 days ago. He saw the predator. I smiled. It was the same smile I had given him the night of the first party. "Thank you, Gavin," I said. My voice was amplified, booming across the silent garden. That was a beautiful story. Truly, it had everything. Drama, sacrifice, redemption. I paused. The silence was thick, heavy, and suffocating. "But there is one problem with stories," I said, my voice dropping to a conversational, almost intimate volume that drew everyone in. Sometimes, the narrator gets confused about who the hero is, and sometimes they get confused about who did the work. I saw Gavin's smile falter. He took a half step toward me. "Okay, Liv, that is enough." "I am not done," I said sharply. The command in my voice froze him. I turned to the crowd. "My brother said he carried me," I said. "He said he gave me a blueprint. He said the Vantigrid deal was a triumph of his strategic vision." I looked directly at Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne," I said, "I believe you are here because you value that vision, because you value the integrity of the work your firm produces." Thorne looked confused, but he nodded slowly. "I agree," I said. "Integrity is everything. Which is why I think it is important that you know exactly where that vision came from." I gestured to Miles. "Miles, if you please." Miles whipped the black cover off the projector he had set up on the catering table while everyone was watching me. He hit a button. A massive beam of light cut through the twilight. It hit the white side of the house, right above the banner that said, "Happy Birthday, Dad." The image that appeared was crisp, bright, and undeniable. It was a title slide. The Vantigrid Proposal Authorship Analysis. A gasp went through the crowd. "Olivia," my mother shrieked. "Stop this! Stop this right now!" "Gavin," I said, turning to him as the light of the projection illuminated his terrified face. "You wanted to talk about blueprints. Let's talk about blueprints." I clicked the remote I had pulled from my pocket. The slide changed. "Let's talk about March 12th, I said, and I pressed the button. The light from the projector cut through the evening air like a laser, casting the damning title slide onto the white siding of my parents' house. It hovered there, right above the Happy Birthday banner, a ghostly indictment in high definition, the Vantigrid Proposal Authorship Analysis. The silence in the garden was absolute. It was not the awkward silence of a paused conversation. It was the vacuum of a room where the oxygen had suddenly been sucked out. The champagne glasses stopped midway to mouths. The polite smiles froze into rictus masks of confusion. I held the microphone loosely in my hand. I did not shout. I did not tremble. I spoke with the calm, terrifying cadence of a judge reading a verdict. 10 days ago, I said, my voice clear and amplified, bouncing off the manicured hedges. I stood right there, by the fireplace inside, and I listened to my brother, Gavin, give a speech. He called me uneducated. He called me worthless. He called me a professional family dependent. I looked at Gavin. He was standing frozen near the edge of the stage, his face a mask of pale shock. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "And you laughed," I said, scanning the crowd. I met the eyes of the neighbors. I met the eyes of my uncle. You all laughed. It was a great joke, the successful consultant and his failure of a sister. I clicked the remote. The slide changed. On the wall, 2 documents appeared side by side. On the left was a screenshot of a file labeled Uneducated Pitch Deck Final, PPTX, created by Olivia Sanchez. On the right was the PDF Gavin had submitted to Redwood Strategy Group. "But here's the punchline you missed," I continued. "I am uneducated because when I was 21, my father had a heart attack." I pointed at my father. He was staring at the wall, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "The family business was collapsing," I said. "There was no money to pay the vendors. There was no money to pay the mortgage, and there was certainly no money to pay for Gavin's final year of private university tuition. So, a choice was made, not by me, but for me." I walked closer to the edge of the stage. "I dropped out," I said. "I worked double shifts at a diner. I drove the delivery van. I managed the books at 2 a.m. so my mother could sleep and my father could recover. I gave up my degree so Gavin could have his. I paid for the suit he is wearing right now with the tips I made serving coffee to truckers." A murmur rippled through the crowd. My mother stepped forward, her hands fluttering. "Olivia, stop," she hissed, her voice trembling with panic. "This is not the time. You are drunk. Step down." I ignored her. I clicked the remote again. The slide zoomed in on the metadata. Date created March 12th. Author Olivia Sanchez. Date submitted by Gavin Sanchez. March 16th. "You called me a leech." "Gavin?" I said, turning to face him fully. "You told these people I bide my time doing nothing. But when you were drowning on the Vantigrid account, when you didn't have the creative capacity to deliver what you sold, who did you call?" Gavin took a step toward me. "It was a template," he stammered, his voice cracking. "She is lying. She just helped with the formatting. It is a template." "Is it?" I asked. I clicked the remote. The screen filled with an email from Gavin to me, dated March 12th. Subject, "Help me. Body live. I am dead. I have no idea how to visualize this data. Please, just do your magic. Build the deck. I will owe you my life." The projection was 20 feet wide. There was no missing it. I looked at Marcus Thorne. The senior partner of Redwood Strategy Group was not looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at Gavin. His expression was unreadable, but his body language was loud. He had stepped away from my father. He had unbuttoned his jacket. He looked like a man realizing he had bought a counterfeit watch. "You built your promotion on my work," I said to Gavin. "You stood in front of your partners, in front of our parents, and you claimed my sleepless nights as your genius. And then, to add injury to the theft, you mocked me for not having the title you stole from me." "It is a misunderstanding," Gavin yelled, looking frantically at Thorne. "Marcus, she is mentally unstable. I told you, she has been having episodes. She fabricated this." My mother lunged for the stage. She grabbed the edge of my blazer. "Give me the microphone," she shrieked. "You ungrateful, spiteful girl. You are ruining everything. Cut the power. Someone cut the power." I pulled away from her grip. I didn't let go of the mic. "Let me finish," I shouted. My voice boomed, drowning out her screeching. "You didn't let me speak at the last party. You haven't let me speak for 10 years. You are going to listen to me now." The sheer force of my voice stopped her. She froze, her hands still reaching, her eyes wide with a fear she had never felt before, the fear of a victim who refuses to be a victim. I looked back at the crowd. I looked at Marcus Thorne. "You might be thinking this is just a sibling dispute," I said, lowering my voice again. "You might be thinking Gavin just borrowed some slides. But a pattern is not a mistake. A pattern is a policy." I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black for a second. Then a new document appeared. It was the notarized statement from David Lynn. "This is David Lynn," I said. "He was an intern under Gavin 2 years ago. He was fired for data falsification, except he didn't falsify the data. Gavin did. And when compliance flagged it, Gavin erased his own logs and blamed the 20-year-old kid who didn't have the power to fight back. The color drained from Gavin's face completely. This was the kill shot. Plagiarism was bad. Framing a subordinate was fatal. Marcus Thorne pulled his phone out of his pocket. He started typing furiously. The other partners were whispering, looking at Gavin with expressions of open disgust. Gavin looked around the garden. He looked at his friends, his neighbors, his parents. He saw the shift. He saw the structure of his life, the one built on charm and lies, beginning to buckle. "Live," he whispered, and this time, there was no arrogance. There was only desperation. "Please, don't do this. We can talk. I can fix this. Just turn it off." "I can't fix it, Gavin," I said. "Because I didn't break it. You did." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "And for the record," I said, holding the phone up so the screen caught the light of the projector, "I am not just showing pictures at a party. This isn't a performance." I looked at Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, you don't need to worry about investigating this yourself. I have already compiled the full dossier, the original files, the email chains, the metadata, and the affidavit from David Lynn." I looked down at my screen. The email to the Redwood Ethics Committee was open. The send button was glowing blue. "I told myself I would only do this if you lied one more time," I said to Gavin. "And you stood on this stage and lied about carrying me." I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a prisoner walking out of the gate. "I am done carrying you, Gavin." I pressed my thumb against the glass. "Sent." I held the phone up. "It is with your ethics committee and your HR department, and I CC'd the legal team at Vantigrid, just so they know who actually designed the brand they just bought." A collective gasp went through the crowd. This wasn't just a firing. This was professional annihilation. I dropped the hand holding the phone to my side. I looked at my parents. My father was slumped in a chair, looking old and defeated. My mother was sobbing, not for me, but for the image she had lost. "I didn't come here to ask for your love," I said to them. "I stopped waiting for that a long time ago, and I didn't come here to ask for an apology, because I know you don't think you did anything wrong." I scanned the faces in the garden one last time. "I came here to finish the story," I said. "You can tell people I am crazy. You can tell them I am jealous. You can tell them whatever you want, but you will never, ever be able to tell them I am worthless again." I bent down and placed the microphone gently on the stage floor. It didn't screech. It just made a hollow thud. I turned and walked down the steps. The crowd parted for me. This time, they didn't look away. They stared. They stared with fear, with awe, with the uncomfortable realization that they had witnessed a demolition. Miles was waiting by the gate. He had already packed the projector. He looked at me, his eyes wide, and gave a single, sharp nod. We walked to the car. Behind me, I heard the chaos starting. I heard my mother screaming at Gavin. I heard Marcus Thorne's voice, cold and angry, asking Gavin to step aside for a conversation. I heard the shattering of the perfect Sanchez family portrait. I opened the car door and slid into the passenger seat. The leather was cool against my legs. "Drive," I said. Miles started the engine. We rolled down the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath us. My phone started to buzz. Incoming call Mom. Incoming call Gavin. Incoming call Dad. It vibrated against my leg like a trapped insect. I didn't look at it. I reached into my bag, pulled out the phone, and held it in my hand. We turned onto the main road, leaving the house, the party, and the lies behind us. The sun had set, and the streetlights were flickering on, guiding the way back to Silverport, back to my life. I rolled down the window. The wind rushed in, smelling of night and freedom. I looked at the phone one last time. The screen was lighting up with a text from Gavin. "You killed me. How could you?" I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel sadness. I felt lighter than air. I turned the phone off. The screen went black. I tossed it into the back seat. "Are you okay?" Miles asked softly, glancing at me. I looked out at the road ahead, stretching into the darkness. leading to a city where my name was my own, where my work was my own, and where I was finally, completely free. Yeah, I said, and for the first time in 29 years, it was the absolute truth. I am okay. I closed my eyes and let the wind dry the tears I hadn't realized I was crying. They weren't tears of pain. They were the rain after a long, suffocating drought. I was gone, and I was never looking back. Thank you so much for listening to Olivia's story. It was a journey of justice, but I want to know what you think. Did she go too far? Or was it exactly what they deserved? Please comment down below where you are listening from today. I love seeing our community from all over the world connecting in the comments section. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need a little victory in their day. See you in the next one.